Hello and welcome to Mile High Reefers. I'm Scott Anderson, and I love tangs. But in a reef tank, tangs can be difficult to maintain. So I made a little video to kind of show my experience with the blue, yellow, and purple tangs, and some general tang information to hopefully help make you more successful when keeping tangs. In my tank, I've got 3 tangs. I've got a blue tang, or a hippo tang, or a regal tang, whatever you would like to call it. And I've also got a yellow tang and a purple tang, and they're both of the species Xerosoma. And I've owned the blue tang for about 2.5 years. The yellow tang I've owned for about 2 years, and I've owned the purple tang for 4 to 6 months, somewhere in that range. And I love tangs. They are probably my favorite reef fish. But there's a lot of stuff you should know before purchasing tangs. They're going to show on a lot of websites as easy, and I'm going to say they're moderate. They are not the easiest fish to take care of, mainly because they're susceptible to ick. And that is key to being successful with tangs. So, very first thing you need to do is kind of figure out what you want to keep. So, think if you haven't built your system and you got special tangs that you want to keep, do research and figure out what size system you need to keep a tang. And basically any mid-sized tang is going to need a tank that's probably 75 gallons or greater. You need one that it's at least 4 feet long for these guys, unless they're the really little guys. And that's still not a long-term solution. I wouldn't recommend buying the little tang with the plans of growing him out and then later adding him to a bigger system. Now, if you already have the bigger system, it's a great idea, but if you have a 29-gallon tank, I wouldn't recommend buying a blue tang and putting it in there with the idea that in the future you're going to put together a big system, because it might not happen, and it's really not very good for the fish. So one of the first things you got to do is figure out what you want. So if you want a blue tang, I wouldn't really go any smaller than a 90-gallon system. A 75 would probably get you there, but really you want 4 feet, and the 90 gives you a good dimension and height. A 120 is even better. But really, even the 4-foot tanks for a blue tang is pretty small. If you go back and look at my old videos, I kept Rankin's, our blue tang, in a 90-gallon tank, and he was really pushing the limits of what I should be keeping in that tank. I would recommend, really, for optimum fish health, keep a blue tang in a 6-foot tank. You'll see tons of them in smaller tanks, but really that's not going to give you optimum health on these guys. Your yellow tangs and purple tangs are a bit smaller, and they'll do better in the smaller systems, but I still wouldn't go smaller than about a 75-gallon tank for one of those guys. Now, that being said, there's some really big tangs out there. Like for my tank, I have a 210-gallon tank. This is 6 feet long, 24 inches wide, and I believe 30 inches tall. That's a big tank in my world. And one of the fish I was thinking about getting was a unicorn tang. And I did a bunch of research on these guys, and those fish get even too big for this tank. I mean, and the numbers just, you see them on the page of the website, and they just don't seem that big until you see one in person. But I was thinking I could have one, because you see the numbers on there, and you'll see recommendations for a unicorn tang of 180 gallons. And then you go to a public aquarium and you see a full-size unicorn tang that's 2 feet long. And if you keep a fish in good health in captivity, it should get fairly close to the wild size. And obviously, even in a tank as big as mine, a 2-foot unicorn tang or a Vermingi tang, it's just going to be too big. So it's really important to keep in mind the size of your system before buying a tang. And that's probably the biggest reason I don't have a unicorn tang, is I just didn't feel like my system was big enough for one. The other thing I would say is treat every new tang like it has ick. I know there's going to be a lot of people who disagree with this, but go to your local fish stores. Even the best ones are going to show, if you go in there enough, you'll see ick on the fish. I mean, they're having to treat them in the store. Tangs are just so susceptible to it. In fact, I've had 3 different ick outbreaks since I've had my tangs, and it's only been on the tangs. None of the other fish have ever been affected by it. So whenever you get a new tang, I would say plan on quarantining the tang. Bring him home, plan on putting him into quarantine. If you can't quarantine it, really think twice about whether you need a tang. Honestly, they struggle with ick. The other thing about tangs is they stress out easily and they're aggressive towards each other. So if you have multiple tangs in a tank, they will likely fight each other. And I think that's what brought on my last ick issue, is when I put the purple tang, although I quarantined it and it didn't show any signs of ick, my fish still broke out in ick when I put it in the tank. And the reason most likely is ick probably lives in every system and is almost impossible to eliminate. So once the fish stressed out, they got ick because they were stressed and they could no longer cope with the ick. So it was a battle to beat the ick. So just know that they are incredibly susceptible to ick. And that is one of the bigger things to keeping tangs. Now, they are also susceptible to hole in head and lateral line disease. And the science is still out on exactly what causes it, but the anecdotal data that I'm hearing and my own personal knowledge of it is basically a nutrition issue. So when you have tangs, you need to feed them really high quality foods. So what I feed my fish is the New Life Spectrum pellet formula, but any pellet or flake food that's high quality is going to get you where you want to be. I also like the Julian Sprung sea veggies. This is a type of nori, and tangs absolutely have to have nori to maintain good health. They are herbivores in the wild, so I feed them nori every day. Those 3 tangs in there get half a sheet of nori every day. And then I feed the LRS brand food in the herbivore blend. And this is what every fish in my tank gets every day, is they get a good mix of food. And one of the important things is to provide the right foods and also provide a good mix. The tangs are primarily herbivores in the wild, but you'll notice they totally go after PE mysis or the LRS food and just about anything else you want to feed. But definitely make sure, if you have a tang, you are feeding them the seaweed. And I wouldn't just feed the LRS herbivore blend. I would feed the herbivore blend with the sea veggies. I just want to make sure they get lots and lots of seaweed in their diet. So if you're like me, you're going to decide that if 1 tang is good, 2 tangs is better, and 3 tangs is even better than that. One of the big problems you're going to have is tangs can be aggressive towards other tangs, especially tangs of the same basic genus. So you see I have a purple tang and a yellow tang, and those are both the genus Zebrasoma. And that's one thing I would encourage you to do, is start looking at tang genus species. So you can see you'll have different types of nasos, you'll have different types of Zebrasomas. and they don't necessarily do well together. Now, there's going to be plenty of ways to break those rules, and that's where things are going to get hard. So, I did this, and you can see I have a purple tang and a yellow tang living in relative harmony. And I've got a video on kind of how I did that, and I'm going to link that in this description down below. But it's really going to come down to the size of the tank you have, the environment you have for them to live in, the amount of food you give them, and the personality of the fish, and just dumb luck. So you may end up getting two fish that actually hate each other and one will kill the other. You may just throw two tangs in and they'll be fine. Odds are you're going to get some aggression. And I would say no matter what, plan on some aggression. Even between dissimilar species. I have the blue tang in there, which is a completely different shape and a completely different genus from the purple and yellow tang. And yet he'll still get in little fights with the purple and yellow tang. Now they are very minor, just minor tail slapping or minor nips, and one of them establishes who's dominant, and that's as far as it goes. Worst damage you'll ever see is a slight split on a fin. No big deal. But it's definitely something to keep in mind. So before mixing tangs, do a lot of research on which tangs you can put together, which tangs you can't, and if you want to put two tangs together that you shouldn't, really make sure you understand what you're doing and have backup plans so you don't accidentally kill one of your fish. It's really important. So, tangs. They are a moderately difficult species to take care of. I would not recommend them as your first fish. I wouldn't recommend them as your second fish. And I would recommend you have a lot of research in front of you before you go out and buy one. Make sure you understand the food they need to eat, the environment they need to be in, the size of the tank they need, and understand the sicknesses that go with tangs. Now, if you get all of that right, they're incredibly easy to take care of. These three tangs in my tank now, all I do is maintain good water quality and feed them. There's absolutely nothing to it. And I've got three absolutely beautiful tangs in my tank, which I think are the best part of the tank, to be honest. I love those fish. Anyways, I hope this video can be helpful to you. This is exactly what I wish I would have had before buying my first tank, so I'm putting it out there. Hopefully I can help others. So, thank you for watching this episode of Mile High Reefers. I'll see you on the next one. Feel free to like and subscribe. Thanks again.